I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Welcome to On Watch, everybody, the Judicial Watch podcast, where we go behind the headlines to report on information that the mainstream media would rather you not know about, where we try to recover some lost history and explain the inexplicable. Today, we have a great guest for you, Erik Prince, probably best known to you as the founder of Blackwater, the professional military services company. And also now he's got a new venture, a new sort of entrepreneurial effort at something called Unplugged, which is a secure proprietary phone and communication service. We'll learn a little bit about Unplugged in a moment. But right now, I want to welcome our friend Erik Prince. Welcome, Erik.
Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you.
You have a tremendous background as a Navy SEAL officer, obviously founder of Blackwater, a long-term there, and you've gone on to do a host of other things. You've got an incredible background professionally, a very influential guy who's accomplished an awful lot. One of the things that I have an impression of about you is that you make the United States government, all the alphabet soup agencies, and some of the people up on Capitol Hill, you have an ability to make them very nervous. That's just my impression. Why is that? Why do you make the government nervous sometimes?
I wouldn't say it's nervous. I would say a healthy competitive tension.
Okay.
Because I think from the experience of building Blackwater, you know, when I laid out that business in '97, I had just gotten out of the SEAL teams and started in the training business. And then as we responded to what government customers needed in Iraq or Afghanistan, I said, what does a military organization do? It recruits, it vets, equips, trains, deploys, and supports people to do a difficult job in a difficult place.
Right.
And so we facilitized to do that and effectively could replicate at a smaller scale everything the military was doing, whether it's building and deploying an air wing. We built to 73 aircraft. We deployed thousands of highly talented people doing security, training, operational, logistics, medical, aviation, even maritime roles. But we did it as a private organization, not as a government entity. And so we understood what our costs were. And, you know, I remember the first time we were ever called to Congress was the Bush administration wanted to add some multiple thousands of CBP officers on the southern border. And they wanted something like $85,000 or $100,000 to train each officer. And Congress asked us how much it would cost us. And we said, well, we could do it for about $25,000 per officer. And literally the CBP officers at that hearing were seething. They were so angry. And we weren't making it up. We knew exactly. We ran a facility that trained 800 people a day. We fired 1.2 million rounds a month. We understand training, but we could do it so much cheaper. And so the government guys just hated that. They hated someone that could do it faster, better, cheaper, because it's antithetical to government. And it's really antithetical to the way of Washington.
So given that experience and given you have a very long track record doing this is not, you know.
And that's not a one-off.
No,
there's a lot of those.
Right. You've got tremendous credentials doing this. I want you to take those experiences and that sort of knowledge base, that level of understanding, and I'd like you to apply that to what we saw on Saturday, late afternoon, early evening in Pennsylvania with President Trump and the near assassination. Through your eyes, through your lenses, how do you evaluate that?
It is I don't think people realize we were 2 inches from a disaster akin to the outbreak of World War I. Because World War I started from the assassination of Francis Ferdinand, the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it literally corked off World War I, which ended up rewriting the map of Europe and much of the world.
Sure.
And if Donald Trump was assassinated while supposed to be protected by the federal government, by yet another federal institution that failed, I think it would have been a straw that broke a camel's back. So I think what happened was, you know, it's easy to smell conspiracy, and maybe there is some, but I'm not sure. I'll withhold judgment. But what we did see was horrifically bad incompetence in allowing, and now you're even seeing reports of there was a SWAT team in the building underneath where the guy was shooting from.
Right.
But the layers of badness, of stupidity are, at this point, endless. 140-yard shot with a long gun is like point-blank range. I mean, a 12-year-old first-time deer hunter can make that shot.
Correct.
Easily. So the fact that those areas were unwatched and unguarded, uncontrolled, is, to me, unimaginably bad. The fact that there was Secret Service counter snipers supposedly watching him, trying to identify in the scope for up to a minute. They have no shoot first capability. They see this guy getting set up, pointing a rifle at the president. Unbelievable. The fact that there wasn't a radio call by the counter snipers to make President Trump get behind cover until they could at least identify, or didn't have to kill the guy, but to interdict, send an officer up there to say, what are you doing to stop it? It would have saved lives, because the guy right behind Donald Trump was murdered for his crime of going to a political rally. So their bungling incompetence literally cost lives that day, and it could have cost untold lives, millions of lives, if something like if a war were to cork off in the United States. But even once the shots were fired, I would say some of the bungling of getting him off the X. The X is where an assassin has decided to attack you or to kill your protectee. And it is your job as a protective team is to get him off the X immediately. President Trump's instincts of standing up with the fight, brilliant, Teddy Roosevelt-like. But that should not have been his call to make. His team should have gotten him off of there immediately. So you could tell, again, from having deployed, and we did almost 100,000 protective missions between Iraq and Afghanistan. No one under our care was killed or injured, fortunately. But you could tell that team had not really practiced together, had not really practiced under stress. You know, there's a reason that the Navy started Top Gun in the 60s, because they figured that if they could simulate combat for the first 10 combat missions for a pilot, their survival rate went way up.
Right.
You can do the same thing for protective teams or combat units with really dialing up the physical and mental stress. Clearly that hasn't been done, because you can see the effects of stress in the shaking hands and trying to reholster,
right,
and even the radio calls. Where are we going? What are we doing? It should not be. It should be absolutely programmed, beaten into them in training. If A, then B. If B, then C. So that you can react when your body, and I understand, it was their worst professional day ever. Their body floods them with adrenaline.
Right.
So trying to think clearly is hard.
It's got to be muscle memory.
Exactly. There was clearly some very capable officers there, and there were some that just didn't belong or had not received adequate training from the advanced team, which never should have allowed those areas to be unchecked. Basically, an unwatched sniper hotel, the logical place a sniper is going to set up, to the rules of not engaging earlier, or of locking down the principal before any shots were fired. Even you see the video of the counter sniper, you know, from the perspective of the crowd, you see that sniper actually come off his scope. Shouldn't be doing that. His eye should be on that scope, doing his business, taking that shot. So there's a lot of training and a lot of readiness that needs to be dialed up.
Right.
And Secret Service can say, yes, they were undermanned, there wasn't a budget. Probably all true. But it's still up to you to make it work with what you have. And even the close protection detail of full-time Secret Service agents clearly had not even been doing drills that morning. It doesn't cost anything. Maybe it costs you an hour of sleep to get up earlier and to drill it, and to drill it, and to drill it, and to drill it in the parking lot, and to get it right before it's game time, because that was a massive professional embarrassment for the Secret Service. It could have had generational affecting changes to the United States. And trust me, it's another embarrassment to the United States on the world stage, whether we are screw up in Afghanistan, our screw up in Gaza that we can't even build a pier that costs $230 million and gets washed away every few days, It's just one massive screw up of a overbloated federal institution after another. And it's bad. That is not what made our country great ever. And it speaks to the need to return to merit and mission capability are the only things should be hiring and firing criteria, nothing else. No other social engineering idea du jour, no. We focus on getting the mission done, period.
Do you trust the FBI to conduct a thorough investigation?
No, I do not. Not at all. I think they're incapable of it at this point. I think you guys have been frustrated by every bit of discovery or whatever from anything else they've touched.
Right.
It's become a political mess. And so I would argue for an independent investigation, a panel of experts, right? You could find 10 great former Secret Service, former professional snipers, professional protective officers, a panel of 6 or 10 experts, give them subpoena power under some kind of congressional mandate.
Yep.
And let them do all the interviews live, untaped, end to end, and let the massive disinfectant capability of transparency answer these questions.
Exactly right. I want to talk to you about the challenges the country faces going forward. So we've had this unmitigated disaster on the military and foreign policy side of what the Biden administration's done. It's been a humiliation. You touched on a couple of the points in your answer to my question just a moment ago. But when it comes to restoring U.S. global leadership, where we are respected again, we're both respected and feared, in the good sense of being feared, by both our allies and our enemies. How do we get there? Let's just assume President Trump returns to office, and he's got to pick up a big mess. He's got to clean up and repair some damages, because we've alienated even our best friends, right? Let alone our relationship with hostile countries. What are the steps? What are some things that he needs to do right off the bat?
The foreign policy of the United States should be that our friends love us, our rivals respect us, and our enemies fear us. So the first thing we must do is be very consistent. If we say one thing, that's what we're going to follow through on. And if the opponents or the enemies keep probing and pushing, they are delivered consequences. One of the problems with the CIA that's lost its way is, I would argue that the State Department could handle 10% of issues. You have a massive conventional military, which should be powerful and almost like an attack dog on leash, right? Just waiting to be let off, but you don't have to, because in the middle, you have the Title 50 authorities of the intelligence community that is supposed to be able to deliver covert action to quietly deliver consequences to countries that are constantly pushing and probing. And unfortunately, we're incapable of doing that anymore. So we get rolled constantly. Cleaning up the federal institutions to put people that are not risk averse. I think it's very important for the leaders that are going to task people to make those decisions, understand risk in their own personal lives even. Meaning, what do they do that's dangerous, that makes the hair on the back of their neck stand up, to say, all right, I got to be careful doing this because I could die doing this. If you don't have that frame of mind, it's very hard for you to send, right, what did Clausewitz say? There's 2 kinds of courage to fight a war. Individual soldiers' courage to go take the hill, and the leadership must have the moral courage to commit their people to an uncertain outcome.
We face very great. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's two opposites to describe this. One, it's like 7 weeks ago in May, in Haiti, there was an American missionary couple. They'd been there for 3 months. They're on their way home from a youth event. They get ambushed by a gang. They make it to their house. The husband is defending from an attacking gang with an M4 inside the house. They're desperately calling to the U.S. Embassy 1 mile away from their house, less than a mile away, calling for help. Nothing. Don't even allow the Marine Guards, nobody, or the fast company that's over at the airport, nothing to do anything. In contrast, Trump, October of 2020, just before the last presidential election, an American 27-year-old kid, Phil Walton, kidnapped off of his farm. And the agency is able to watch him with the drone from drones from the drone base, since been kicked out of by the Russians in this year. And they watch this guy, and Trump, to his credit, having the moral authority and the courage to launch a rescue package right before the election. And the JSOC package goes, they free fall, they find the hostages, and they find the hostage and the terrorists. They dispatch the terrorists. They wake him up. Imagine Phil Walton goes to sleep surrounded by jihadis in the middle of the desert. And now he wakes up to a space alien, not with 2 goggles, but 4, right? Because they have the Ambush 21, so they have better peripheral vision.
Right.
And they say, hey, wake up, buddy. We're Americans. We're going to come to take you home. Hell yes. That's exactly what American foreign policy should be. So, it's important to not equate buying stuff with buying capability. If you just buy stuff and you don't have the mental capacity to deploy brave people to get a job done, you're just buying inventory.
Right.
And the United States we bought a lot of inventory. We have a software problem.
We sure do.
Of having the right leadership with the right mentality to do that. Now, those people still exist.
They do.
They're around, but they have been passed over for the politicians in uniform. And so the best thing the president can do is a thorough house cleaning of the senior commissioned officer ranks,
That's
especially 07 and above.
Yep.
And a wholesale, let's say a steel broom going through those ranks would be very necessary and very healthy for the military.
Amen. Amen. So we face 2 incredible threats from 2 very different types of enemies. One, of course, is China. China's not going anywhere, and it's becoming increasingly aggressive. And, of course, the Mexican drug cartels are a very well-financed paramilitary force that, is in one respect, the #1 killer of Americans 18 to 45 is fentanyl. And the precursor chemicals come from China, and the cartels wholesale it. And American street gangs like MS-13 are the retail distributors. It's a very sophisticated operation, very different types of threats, but they're working synchronously against us. And even when you talk about China, you can look at how the United States Marine Corps has completely rewritten and re-engaged its mission. When the Marine Corps no longer has tanks, and they have missile teams running around island hopping in the Philippines. There's a lot of different moving pieces with respect to how we engage these 2 very different but very powerful and synchronized threats to us, China and the Mexican drug cartels. I know I just threw out a very big thing for you to address.
That's okay. But I like big problems.
Have at it. Have at it.
So, the last time the U.S. had problems with border bandits would have been in the early teens, right? That's where Patton and Pershing cut their spurs, going after Pancho Villa. I would say it's not a great idea for a large-scale U.S. military intervention in Mexico, but I'd say there's room in the covert action space or even old-fashioned bounties, to put bounties on each of the cartel leadership and seriously degrade their ability to menace the Mexican society and our society.
Right.
Important fact, 27 political candidates in Mexico this last election cycle were assassinated by cartels, largely funded by China, and they were all right of center candidates to support the leftists. The last president in Mexico that was just elected is a very leftist, even further left than AMLO.
Right.
And so there's definitely room in the covert action world to do that, because you're right. It is a organized, funded, facilitated by the Chinese Communist Party to destroy and rot from within American society. And I don't think the number, I think I've heard the number at 109,000 people last year.
It's more than that. A hell of a lot more than that.
I'd say the number is 3 to 4 times that.
I agree. It is the chemical bombardment of the United States from China. China is chemically bombarding us.
We lost 400,000 people in World War II. We're losing that per year to fentanyl right now.
I agree.
And I say enough. Second, I think you could make the Chinese Communist Party feel that pressure inside China, if nothing else for fentanyl. But I would argue that when Reagan took office, we'd had 35 years of containment. And he said, enough containment, we're going to screw the commies. We're going to go at them economically, politically, culturally, socially, in every way push back on the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. We need to do that to the Communist Party of China. China has a habit of coming together under a strong dictator and then breaking apart into some of the 56 different ethnic component parts that make up China. It's time to help us. It's time for us to help them come apart a bit and have the people residing under CCP rule breathe more freely.
That's an excellent idea.
That would prevent their malign activities in the rest of the world if they have to deal with issues at home. Because you can imagine, Cantwell being one of them, they are doing those kind of programs to us in our society right now, and our people are suffering from it, and I say enough. The best defense is a good offense. And it is not going out to pick a fight warfare-wise. No. This is below the surface subterfuge. And this is why you need a very capable, potent intelligence community that is not worried about tampering in U.S. elections, but in interfering with our enemy's ability to hurt us.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it always is that, so I'm a Cold Warrior of that era, and there were people that went to work in the government every day to defeat the Soviet Union, right? And it was done, like you said, not in a overt, there was never, full the gap never happened, right? I spent a lot of time. Right. I spent a lot of time there, but that's where World War III didn't happen. But, there were active measures group type people who went to work every day on how we're going to destabilize and break the Soviet Union. I don't believe that we currently have anybody that goes to work every day thinking, how are we going to destabilize and break up China? No one does that.
That's my point. That's
right.
Exactly right.
Right. And that's what has to happen. We need to have a concerted, organized effort of how do we destabilize and bring down the CCP. And when we do that, we change the game completely. I want to touch on one last subject area with you, and that is I'm a little bit older than you, but as in our professional military careers and then afterwards, we've seen sort of schools of thought or sort of brand names put on different military concepts over time. So there was active defense, there was air-land battle, there's all these different names, there's a revolution in military affairs. There's all these sort of periods of operational philosophy that get brand names put on them. But as you discussed with Tucker Carlson just a couple of weeks ago, Ukraine offers us a radical shift, a big shift in how we're thinking. Also, just the logistics, the weapon systems. This is a really transitional moment. We got a hell of a lot of lessons we need to learn fast. Just touch on that if you can, please.
The first strategic offset was nuclear weapons. We had nuclear weapons, the Soviets didn't. Then they had nuclear weapons, and then we just competed on how many tons we could deliver to each other.
Right.
And then we went to precision strike. And you saw that play out in Gulf War I, Gulf War II. Now everyone has precision weapons, to the point of, a 12-year-old kid with a first-person viewer drone can put a beer can size charge on the bottom of that drone and fly it into a tank many miles away. It's a step change in warfare. I would say going from crossbows or longbows and spears, not to just wheel-lock or matchlock muskets, but to bolt-action rifles. It is massive. The proliferation, the democratization of precision strike down to two guys with a backpack.
Right.
And so that obsolesces billions, hundreds of billions, or even trillions of dollars of installed capacity. And so if the Pentagon must adapt extremely quickly to that new reality, or small, potent challengers to that will give them a very nasty schooling.
Yeah, I mean, the thought of, as you just mentioned, drones or a swarm of drones coming in over sort of what we would think of as a conventional armored or even mech infantry force, and a swarm of 20, 30, 50 drones buzzes in and knocks out God knows how many millions of dollars of armor,
yeah.
Right? Low tech, but highly, highly effective. This is a shift I don't know that we're prepared for. I mean,
That's my point.
Another thing is, we're very used to air supremacy. We're used to flying and doing whatever we damn well please, and essentially no one or very few can knock us out of the air. And that is not the case with our next wave of opponents. And I think that's another real mind shift of when hey, there's very competent guys now flying against you. And they also have ground-based missile systems that can reach out and touch you. That isn't Iraq or Afghanistan.
You know who else is used to air superiority? The Israelis. You know who's having a really hard time combating loitering, kamikaze drones?
Right.
The Israelis. 50% of those coming from the north, from Hezbollah area, are getting through,
right,
causing real damage. So they built some spectacular Iron Dome, the high-altitude ballistic missile defense, all the rest. The stuff that's coming through at 20 meters off the deck,
right,
that's causing them huge problems, and that same capability would cause the U.S. military huge problems. Adapt now or suffer the consequences.
Yeah, and that's just not even a kinetic thing. That can also, it goes into the world of electronic warfare and jamming, and there's a lot of other factors in there. But I think we need to do some very serious catch-up, and I'm hoping that very smart guys are doing that somewhere in DOD.
Well, hope is not a policy.
Erik Prince, I want to thank you for your time. You gave us some great insights on very important stuff. Where can folks follow you and see what you're doing and what you're up to?
So this is the thing I've been working on the hardest the last 3 years. This is an Unplugged phone, and this is a new product we've just come to market with, completely independent of the Google and Apple universe. Because in the nonsense after the 2020 election, we decided we're not going to change big tech by complaining about it, but by competing with it. And so this phone, unlike everybody else's, doesn't collect and export your data. So it's privacy focused. They can look into that at unplugged.com. They can order now, but we also they can follow me on Twitter at real Erik D. Prince, and I do post quite regularly on there. And then I have a podcast called Off Leash with Erik Prince. And
we will put links to your phone and to your social media and your show as well in our show description, so folks listening to or watching this can click on that and follow and find out all that you're doing. Erik Prince, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
I'm Chris Farrell on Watch.